Hi there guys, and welcome to another episode of the Cover Zero Show with me, your host Simon Conboy. Coming up today, a special episode of the Cover Who series because, well, they're all special. This episode will be covering the former Seahawks, Cowboys and Buccaneers wide receiver Joey Galloway. For those of you who haven't seen this series before, I basically just discuss a player that I feel has been somewhat forgotten since their retirement, but when they were in the NFL, they were a very good player. If there was a hall of very good, they're the kind of players that would merit some consideration. Now, I've got to say, been considering doing this particular player for a while. Didn't catch all of his early career, slightly before I started watching, but I am familiar with him, particularly for his time with the Buccaneers, which I did witness all of, and a few of the years where he was with the Cowboys. And I've got to be honest, I was surprised at his numbers. They were better career numbers than I expected. This may be the most unheralded 10,000 yard receiver in NFL history or thereabouts. I mean, career stats: 700 catches, 10,950 yards, 77 receiving touchdowns and 5 special teams touchdowns. Those are pretty good numbers. Particularly, his time in the league, he wasn't. It was less pass heavy than it is today. The early 90s had some 1,000-yard seasons with the Seahawks, which is pretty good going. How many was that? Rookie season. I mean, a rookie season with 1,000 yards, that's pretty impressive. Second season, close, 987 yards. Then 1,000 yards in his third season. And then his fourth season, another 1,000-yard season. That's a very impressive start to a career. Then got traded to the Cowboys for 2 first-rounders. Was a bit of a bust there. Had some injuries. Was on a massive contract. And then ended his career with some pretty good seasons in Tampa. Bit of a bust in his first season with an injury. But then after that, he was the Bucs' number 1. Managed to have 1,200-yard season with 10 touchdowns. That's a great year. I can't believe he didn't make the Pro Bowl off those stats. Then another 1,000-yard season with 7 touchdowns. And then his final successful season, another 1,000-yard season. I mean, this is a guy that had 6,000-yard seasons and one that's very close. Some double-digit touchdown seasons. It's really impressive that he's managed to become this forgotten. I can't think of a lot of people who've mentioned him over the last few years. But this was one of the top deep threats in the NFL. Think probably not quite as. In fact, no. I think Deshaun Jackson's a fair comparison. This guy was always a threat to blow the lid off of a defense. I mean, Lord knows the Buccaneers haven't had a receiver with that ability up until signing Deshaun Jackson this off-season. Injuries shortened his career maybe not shortened, but limited those statistics. Without those, who knows how much better he could have done. The Dallas years were a bit of a bust and then sort of bounced around a couple of teams not playing after he was cut by Tampa. But I mean, this was a reliable, speedy receiver. And you think back to those Buccaneers teams, he didn't have a lot of help on those offenses. A couple of years had decent run games. Carnell Williams rookie season. Other than that, not really a huge amount of help. I mean, you had guys like Maurice Stovall, Michael Clayton, who had like a good rookie year and then did nothing for the rest of his time. Yeah, this was the primary threat on those teams, and to be able to compile 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons, I think is particularly impressive, especially as well looking at who he had throwing him the ball. I apologise to Seahawks fans. I'm not really able to comment so much on that period of his career. I personally was not watching the NFL back then as a 6 to 10 year old over here in the UK. Wasn't really something that I was able to watch. Not sure my parents would let me stay up that late, in all honesty. But yeah, when he was with Tampa, I think he was a very good player. The most shocking thing to me is amidst all those statistics, which I think, pretty good. I think most players would take that in their career. Not one Pro Bowl and not one well, maybe didn't warrant an all-pro season at any point, but not one. I think that's probably an injustice, especially a season where you get 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns. I think that certainly at least merits heavy consideration. I mean, we're not even talking as like a backup. So I'm very disappointed to see that was the case. I don't remember paying as much attention to the Pro Bowl back then. To be honest, I don't pay a huge amount of attention to it now, but to me it does symbolise some degree of recognition. And this was before the fan vote as well, if I can remember correctly. And the fan voting has just made the Pro Bowl even less significant, in my opinion. But yeah, this was a really good player, and I don't know why. He's the kind of player you'd think maybe players would be compared to when they're coming out of college, to have a career like that. He was a bigger body than Deshaun Jackson, not by a huge amount, but that's probably the closest comparison I've got, because that's really what he did. Didn't run a huge amount of the short routes. His job was to go deep and intermediate, and he did both of those things well. Wasn't necessarily the most elusive guy after the catch, but straight line speed is straight line speed, and if you can do that and you can catch, you can have an effective career. Had great release, great acceleration, a lot of traits you look for in a top end target. So yeah, very impressed with those numbers. It was what, as I say, this was a player I was meaning to do because I haven't actually covered a Buccaneer on this show yet. Frankly, there's probably not a huge amount of Buccaneers that deserve it. Most of the great ones are remembered. There are a few decent players that I've got in mind, but Joey Galloway was near the top of the list. I looked up those numbers. I knew he was successful in Seattle. I didn't know he was quite that successful. It does explain why he was given such a large contract by the Cowboys. Of course, end up going to Tampa as part of a direct swap for Keyshawn Johnson. I think the Bucs got a pretty good deal there, actually. Keyshawn was, of course, a giant headache in Tampa. Trading him and then getting a guy who's going to give you 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons, you'd probably take that. I don't remember him ever causing any kind of issues in Tampa, other than being injured a reasonable amount. But he was a very good player. So yeah, I can't believe how little recognition he got whilst he was in the league. So no surprise, if you're not going to make a Pro Bowl whilst you're in the NFL, in spite of those kind of numbers, then I guess people aren't necessarily going to remember you. I suppose his one chance to probably gain national recognition would have been with the Cowboys, and that didn't work out. Seattle, not the biggest market, particularly back then when they were more of a struggling team. And the Bucs, of course, this was the post Super Bowl years where the defense was still great, but the Bucs weren't really ever a threat in those years to go to the Super Bowl, even though they did make the playoffs a couple of times. Yeah, this is exactly what I think this show is about, highlighting these kind of players. If you ever want to watch some good Joey Galloway games, just watch it any time he played against the Saints. For some reason, he seemed to absolutely have their number, always went off. Wasn't a guy that was going to blow up and have 7-8 catch games. You don't expect that from this type of receiver. Maybe 4 or 5, but those 4 or 5 could go for 120 yards and a touchdown. So remember these guys. One of the best Buccaneers receivers of all time. It's a pretty thin list, so probably would qualify for the Seahawks as well. I mean, they've got Steve Largent overshadowing everyone. No one else to my knowledge, no one of massive significance. Doug Baldwin could get there, he's very good. And Bucks now have Mike Evans, who's almost by default the best Buccaneers receiver ever. Vincent Jackson in there. We're talking time I've been watching anyway. Old school Bucks fans, maybe there was someone in the 70s, 80s and 90s that was also great. I know about Jimmy Giles, but he was a tight end. But anyway, I'm diverging here. So there we go. That's my Cover Who player this week. Joey Galloway, forgotten deep threat who somehow had 10,000 yards in his career, over 10,000 yards, over 70 touchdowns, and managed to never make a Pro Bowl and seems to be somewhat forgotten. I'm not entirely sure how that happens, so I'm trying to resolve that situation. Thank you very much for watching. As always, been a pleasure. Let me know what you guys think. Any players you think I should be looking to cover for this show. I do have a pretty big list of players I'm looking to do, but of course, always open to suggestions. There's probably some I haven't necessarily thought about. There might be some I'd like to go re-watch on the old Game Pass, particularly for some of the teams I wasn't watching as frequently back in the mid-2000s. So let me know. Comment section below. Find us on Facebook, Cover Zero. Find me on Twitter at Simon Conboy. I'm more than happy to have those discussions with people. Love talking ball, and this series is one that I'm pretty passionate about. So yeah, do that. Got the weekly review coming up. That's going to have the top 10 interior pass rushers. Well, interior linemen. They're not all pass rushers in that list, but interior linemen in the NFL at this point in time. As you guys know, not a whole lot of news to discuss at this point in time, so just doing that to, bring a bit of spice to those episodes at the moment. So check that out. Next week I'll be doing another one of these. I've got a special version of the power rankings coming up. I was going to do them on Monday. Not a big fan of them, so I've tried to do something a little different with it. Tune in. I think you'll probably enjoy that. And as always, like, share, subscribe, check out the Patreon, all that good stuff. Be thoroughly appreciated. Thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure as always. Have a great evening, and go Bucks.